The concept of immersion is a central part of the gaming experience, and composers have the power to enhance this effect through their music. Immersion and suspension of disbelief. Suspension of disbelief is a concept derived from the world of literature that refers to an activity we voluntarily embrace in order to appreciate a work of art that includes some imaginative aspects that in other contexts would not be credible. This means that we as spectators accept the fact that something unrealistic can become probable and believable as long as the author commits to create an authentic work developed through a strong narrative. The idea of immersion refers to a state of mind in which we are completely submerged into something or surrounded by it. When experiencing a work of art, immersion occurs when we get so taken over by the experience that we forget how we are experiencing it in the first place. It can be a book, a screen, etc. Video games offer a type of immersion different than that of other forms of entertainment, as it is an active experience. Usually, the term flow is used to describe the moment when a gamer becomes so involved in the experience that the activity becomes spontaneous and momentarily loses his sense of self-awareness. The relationship between suspension of disbelief and immersion is one of mutual need, where one can't exist without the other. The more an immersive experience gives the feeling of an authentic world, the easier it is for the participant to suspend his disbelief, which in turn allows a complete immersion effect. The consequences of complete immersion include the loss of awareness of the passage of time and a euphoric and pleasurable feeling that urges the player to return to the game. There are 3 levels of immersion: engagement, engrossment, and total immersion. Engagement is the first level of immersion, which describes the gamer's willingness to dedicate time and effort to the game. During this period, the player had to memorize a set of given rules and develop a series of skills that are inherent to the game. At the beginning of almost any game, the player can be presented with a variety of options that range from choosing the avatar to setting the difficulty of the game, the layout of the controller, the video and audio levels, and many other game parameters, as well as tutorials that present the mechanics of the game. Considering that the player might be overwhelmed by all these options, the role of the composer is to create music that offers emotional reassurance and communicates that going through this trouble will be rewarded with a fun and exciting game. A good idea for this stage might be to avoid strong and energetic music that could increase the gamer's anxiety and confusion. In the next video, taken from the video game Super Mario Galaxy, we can see 2 different moments of the game. In the first one, the game dynamics and controls are being explained to the player. At this moment, the music is calm and soft.
Whee! Whee!
The second clip happens later in the game, when the player already knows the controls. Here, the music is more tense. One strong threat to achieving engagement occurs when the goals of the game become unclear or the passage of time dulls the memory of these goals. In order to revert this, music can provide 2 effective methods to guide the player in the right path. If the player is heading towards the wrong direction, the absence of music can create a sense of nothingness that will subconsciously prompt him to go elsewhere. A second approach is to use music as hints. In this sense, when the player enters a region of interest within the game, an attention-grabbing motif can appear in order to tell the player that the region is worthy of being explored. Another threat to the achievement of engagement is the difficulty that may appear when trying to distinguish different gameplays. Different moments of the game, such as exploration and combat, usually present different button combinations and require a different state of mind from the player. Music is very useful to avoid confusion between gameplays. Sudden changes of energy and intensity in the music can rapidly indicate the player that the situation has changed and that his response should change as well. In the next video, taken from the video game The Witcher 3, we can listen how music changes according to different gameplays. First, Geralt is roaming through the map. At this moment, the controls correspond to the exploration gameplay. Later, when he engages in combat with the drowned, the music changes and indicates the player that the gameplay has changed as well. Now, the controls correspond to the combat gameplay. One last threat to engagement is the large amount of time involvement some games require from their players. If a player must spend long periods of time to achieve goals in the game, he needs to feel that it is time well spent, or not feel the passage of time at all. In this sense, music is really good at distorting the perception of time and can influence the way player experiences long gaming sequences. Engrossment. During the second level of immersion, the player experiences a higher emotional investment and a decrease of self-awareness. In order to achieve this, a video game must offer strong visual, interesting tasks, and a compelling plot. These three aspects can be enhanced by music. Recent studies have shown that music can have an effect on the way we interpret visual stimuli. With this in mind, a good coordination between the visual artist and the composer can lead to great audiovisual results, where the player notices the beauty of the art design, which in turn improves the gaming experience. Another study evidences a relationship between the mood of a person and his field of vision, where happiness related to a large field of vision while sadness related to a narrow one. If we take this into consideration, gaming sequences where the player should focus on a specific object could benefit from sad music, while sequences where players should be aware of the entire picture might benefit from happy music. In order to achieve engrossment, tasks and activities inside the game should be intellectually challenging and enjoyable. According to a study, music can make tasks more enjoyable and even make us better at them. Other studies have shown that music has the ability to improve intellectual performance, although this effect occurs mainly with upbeat music in a major key. Taking this into consideration, we could assume that in fact music can make in-game tasks more interesting, and adding some light into sad or tense cues can help make the gaming sequence more enjoyable. The following video, taken from the video game The Witcher 3, shows an in-game task that is different from the rest of the game. One of the elements that make this task enjoyable is the music, which doesn't appear in any other part of the game. As mentioned earlier, a compelling plot is needed to achieve suspension of disbelief and therefore immersion. A compelling plot should be consistent and plausible between its own rules and at the same time relate to the human condition. Music can be very useful to achieve this, as researchers have proved that music can have an effect on how we understand and appreciate plot. By understanding what makes a story interesting and enjoyable, the composer can highlight those elements through the music. The plot can also be enriched with the use of leitmotifs or authentic atmospheres. In this example of the video game Assassin's Creed, we can listen that music is used to reference a specific time period and a geographical location. Finally, the third stage of immersion is total immersion. Total immersion is achieved when the player consciousness is fully transferred to the world created by the game developers. In order to reach this state, there are two prerequisites: attention and empathy. In this context, attention refers to a highly concentrated state of mind in which the gamer is capable of focusing on all the visual and audio stimuli that the game provides. There are some studies that give insight on how music can be helpful to maintain this state of mind. One study reveals that music can in fact help the listener focus and avoid distractions. Another one suggests that unexpected changes in music structure stimulate the brain region related to attention. This might have repercussions on how composers work, as this contradicts the common idea that different music cues in video games should seemingly pass from one to another. In the video game world, empathy at the stage of total immersion goes beyond simply developing an emotional attachment to the characters in the game. Here, empathy involves the more personal process of imagining oneself in the same perils as the characters. A study revealed that autistic people can respond to emotions in music even though they do not respond to emotions in other human beings. Extrapolating this information to the audiovisual world, We can assume that in order to create true empathy with the characters, it is not only necessary to connect with them in a human level, but also in another dimension that only music can reach. In the next video, taken from the video game The Last of Us, music is used to create empathy with the characters of the game.
Come on, baby girl. I got you. I got you. Oh, shit. Shit. I'm getting you out of here, girl. I got you. I got you. Come on. God damn it, which way? We're okay. We're okay. We're okay. I said get back! Stop!
A truly immersive game will make the gamer forget that he's playing a game. This is an unparalleled experience which composers have the opportunity to help achieve.
I tell you about the evolution of immersion techniques in video games by sound. If we go back to the beginning of the history of video games, the sound had only a role of sound design. Its role was to illustrate the image and fill the silence. Then, the video game is popularized and we can see opening arcade. It is thus that we assign to the sound a new utility. It must no longer fill the void and illustrate the images. It must be in link before the visual aspect of the arcade terminal, pushing the player to spend his money, in the same way as a slot machine, and at the same time keep it as long as possible. That's why the sound and the music are developed in order to create a strong identity, and it can to be developed an automatism on the player who will recognize the game only by the music. It was when the first home consoles came out that the sound was no longer intended to keep the player as much as possible, but to offer him a more original and heterogeneous listening experience than a single music for the duration of the game. This results in a sound design more in line with the more complex gameplay and music by level of playing. However, the technical capabilities of the time are not those of today. Only a very small part of the memory of a game is allocated to the sound, music and sound included. This is why sound designers and composers have to use ingenuity and creativity to create an original and non-redundant sound environment. The solution was to reuse basic sounds to change their nature by applying various effects: pitch, EQ, chorus, etc. In this way, we did not save one by one each sound by applying them variations, which allowed to release more memory to generate other sounds. It is thanks to the appearance of sound synthesis that video games designers were able to program a more complex and changing sound universe while using less technological resources and memory. Indeed, in Donkey Kong, David Wise used a music tracker to enter one by one the samples and the information of modification of the same sound. which lasted 5 weeks but allowed to create a more immersive BO. As technology progressed, more freedom for composers both in terms of memory capacity and sound realism, which naturally pushed the young media that is the video game to draw inspiration from movies. At the present time, we can notice some codes in the use of the sound. It is present not only to make the player adhere to his universe, but also there to help him. To warm, to move him, to surprise him, or in very special cases is at the heart of the gameplay. Its functions is also more diversified and imprinted with these codes in the cinema. The sound design is exaggerated to reinforce the spectacular. The music becomes symphonic.
You must save her. My daughter.
The sound can help to the understanding of the story.
What kind of story?
I don't know. Mother always had stories. Weren't you told me when you were a boy?
There was a man I knew of long ago. His stories were brief and purposeful.
New technology gradually becoming democratized, the VR. This new media appealing to the view immerses the player by offering new sensation. This new device coupled with game design with binaural sound would offer an extremely immersive gaming experience. Only negative point, the binaural sound works only in headphones, which limits its scope. However, the video game can emancipate itself from this difficulty. Some code to bring immersion to all. It is in this context that the game of heroic fantasy, A Blind Legend, was designed, bringing a gaming experience visually impaired by focusing on the sound aspect, which does not exclude hearing players. For this smartphone's game, we can move using the touch screen. The only way to steer us is the sound signs. Almost the entire game has no graphics. This experiment opens the voice to a new kind of video games and demonstrates that there is no way to make a game, as there is not just a one use of sound.
This way, Father!
You embody Edward Blake, the famous blind knight, and you will be guided by your daughter Louise.
Straight ahead! It's straight ahead! Straight ahead!
Since the beginning of the video game, we have constantly pushed realism as far as possible, sometimes inspired by the codes of the cinema, sometimes by creating its own codes. It is through technological advancement that the industry has been able to set up new processes for new uses. of sound in order to renew the player's experience and immersions.
I think we can consider two kinds of immersion. Immersion in the moment and immersion in the context. Immersion in the moment is one of the most essential components of a game. It's the way of guiding the player and giving him active feedbacks about what he's been doing. Thus, the simple fact of hearing the expected SFX coming from the objects surrounding us contributes to immersion. And this is even more true when the quality is good and the techniques used are realistic. A good management of feedbacks and rewards in the sound will also participate in immersing the player. To take a very basic example, even the sounds made by the menu will be useful in the way that they can give the impression that the controls are reactive and give the player a feeling of comfort and ease, promising a better immersion. Or for instance, a piece of music that reacts to the actions and risks taken by the player in a fight could give him the will to be more engaged and encourage him to play the game. Listen to the great composer Olivier de Rivière talking about it.
Si tu ne te bats pas, bon bah la musique sera en retrait. Mais par contre si tu y vas et si tu y mets du tien, et ben la musique va te rendre un reward parce qu'il va se passer quelque chose à la fin d'un combo. Vous voyez? C'est-à-dire qu'on a analysé, on s'est dit ok, il faut engager le joueur à se battre, mais il faut le récompenser aussi à le faire. Pas de combo. Spécial.
Let's just kill them. Have fun with this.
Bon, c'est un exemple, hein. Voilà, c'est jamais quand vous jouerez vous, ça se passerait comme ça. On ne sait pas comment ça va se passer, d'accord? Mais il y a du sens à tout.
Here, immersion is first and foremost a result of the player's engagement, which was boosted by the rewarding music. Of course, immersion can also be produced by music that's reactive and coherent with the different phases of the gameplay. A tense situation will be emphasized by strident music and disturbing sounds. An infiltration sequence could use some ticking sounds, or a warm and intimate orchestration with plucked short notes in order to underline discretion and tension, and so on. Furthermore, the game's world can also make use of this. An instrumentation or colors may change from one space to another. For instance, in Banjo-Kazooie, the orchestration is different whether you're on land or in the water. This example leads me to the second kind of immersion that is often forgotten and downgraded to second place: immersion in the context. What do I mean by that? Well, first we must talk about the game's world in itself. In fact, in many of the great games that marked history, there was a strong world, one that is coherent and believable. A great game's world in itself conveys emotional background and a certain feeling by the atmosphere and mood it emits. If I had to compose for a post-apocalyptical game, what would be the choices I'd have? I could play realism and transcribe this world only with SFX and ambiances. Or I could write music that is in itself a sort of ambience, with synth pads and complex instrumental effects. But I could also put music at the front and build it around things I know from this world and its history. If ruins subsist, I can use cultural references to what the ruins were inspired from, may the references be multiple. If there is a war incoming, I can evoke duality in the colors I choose, may it be in style, harmony, or even tempo. Depending on the main character's personality, we can deduce musical intentions. If he is a loner, then maybe his theme could be played with a soloist, or maybe we can evoke loneliness with musical colors, depending on if this is more of a melancholic loneliness or more of a serene loneliness. If the character is powerful or violent, we can express that through orchestration, dynamism, or even rhythm. If the character longs for peace and mutual aid, then one idea can be to mix different cultural references together in order to achieve some kind of musical universalism. Or another idea could be based on symbolizing hope, for instance. The musical theme is also very important in a way that it gives info to the player about the character's psychology and personalities. Some changes in the character's cognition can be expressed through music and even announced subconsciously. Spread over a long period of time, a good use of musical themes can create real proximity with the characters of the game. This concept is greatly used in Final Fantasy IX, where the theme Melodies of Life is introduced in the very first minute of the game, though it's incomplete and a bit twisted, as if part of it was forgotten. And in fact, in the game, one of the main characters, Dagger, has forgotten her childhood since she faced a trauma. Though we can hear her sing at several points in the game, a melody she can't quite grasp, and can't remember where she heard. The part of the melody that we heard at the very beginning takes shape across the game, and we hear its full beginning in many ways, always a bit hidden or incomplete. Like in the word maps theme, a music we don't really listen actively to, but that is present throughout the whole game. When connected to Dagger, this theme is presenting clearly that it misses some parts. But when we come to the end of the game, we finally hear the full song with lyrics, and we discover that the melody Dagger used to sing was in fact the second part of the theme that was always missing. We connect the pieces.
We met, we left, we held on fast, and then we said goodbye. And who'll hear the echoes of stories never told? Let them ring out loud till they unfold. In my dearest memories, I see you reaching out to me, and you're gone. I still believe that you can call out my name. A voice from the past, joining yours and mine, adding up the layers of harmony.
What the player is feeling at this moment is as if he remembered at last something that he couldn't quite grasp for all this time, like Dagger retrieving her memories. This is immersion.